there is this, the commanders at the very top of the French regime are complacent. They haven't bought into kind of modern ways. They haven't looked at how contemporary technology could help them. I mean, it is absurd, for example, that there isn't a single radio in the Chateau de Vincennes, which is, it's the headquarters of the commander-in-chief of the French Armed Forces, which is General Marshal Maurice Gamelin. I mean, it's just unbelievable. But that is the case, and there's no getting away from that. And it is all the more ironic when you consider that France is actually the most automotive society in Europe. It's the second most automotive society in the world after the United States. By some margin, it has to be said as well. It has a fantastic transportation system. The railway network is superb. There are 8 people for every motorized vehicle in France, which is way above Germany, which is in 1939, that figure is 47, for example. It's 106 in Italy.
So France is very mechanized.
Very mechanized. So come on, guys. Pull your finger out, get it together. And they just don't. They're incredibly slow and cumbersome. And what they think is what will happen is the Germans won't think of going, they won't do a pincer movement because you can't possibly take motorized forces through the Ardennes. That just is not possible, which is the hinge area between the end of the Maginot, the northern part of the Maginot Line, which runs down the eastern border of France. And the northern bit. And so what we'll do with that hinge around the town of Sedan, we'll move into Belgium. We'll meet the Germans before they get anywhere near France. We'll hold them. And while we're holding them, we will bring up our reserves and then we'll counterattack and crush them. That's the idea behind it. But the problem is they don't have a means of moving fast. And their communication systems are dreadful, absolutely dreadful. They're dependent on conventional telephone lines, which, dive bombers and whatever are just kind of absolutely wrecking. Suddenly the streets are clogged with refugees and people can't move. So they're then, telephone lines are down. There's no radios. So you're then dependent on sending dispatch riders on little motorbikes. General Maurice Gamelin sends out a dispatch rider at 6 o'clock in the morning. By 12 o'clock, he hasn't come back. So you then send another one. Finally, the answer comes back at kind of 9 o'clock at night, by which time the kind of Germans advance another 15 miles. And the original message that you sent at 6 o'clock that morning is completely redundant and has passed its sell-by date. And that's happening at every step of the way. So you've got overall command headquarters, then you've got army group, then you've got army, then you've got corps, then you've got division. So the consequence of all that is that French just can't move. They're just stuck. They're rabbits in headlights. And the Germans are able to kind of move them, destroy them in isolation. Meanwhile, they're able to use their excellent communications to very, very good effect. And you were talking about the genius of war. It's not Hitler that's a genius. If anyone's a genius, it's Goebbels, the propaganda chief. And it is their ability to harness that they are the kings of messaging. They don't have X, they don't have social media, but they do have new technology. And that new technology, that new approach is flooding the airwaves with their singular message, which is always the same and has been ever since the Nazis come into power. And it is using radios. And I think radios are really, really key to the whole story, because there is no denser radio network anywhere in the world, including the United States and Germany in 1939. So while it's really behind the times in terms of mechanization, it is absolutely on top of its game in terms of comms. So 70% of households in Germany have radios by 1939, which is an unprecedented number. That is only beaten by United States, and only just. So it is greater than any other nation in Europe. And in terms of flooding the airwaves, it is the densest, because even for the 30% who don't have radios, that's not a problem, because we'll put them in the stairwells of apartment blocks. We'll put them in squares. We'll put them in cafes and bars. And the same stuff, the Nazi state controls the radio airwaves as it does the movies, as it does newspapers. All aspects of the media are controlled by Goebbels and the propaganda ministry, and they are putting out the same message over and over again. It's not all Hitler's ranting. It's entertainment, light entertainment, some humorous shows. It is also Wagner, of course, and Richard Strauss. It's a mixture, but the subliminal message is the same. We're the best. We're the top dogs. Jewish Bolshevik plot is awful. That needs to be, that's the existential threat to us. We have to overcome that. We're the top dogs militarily. We're the best. We should feel really good about ourselves. We're going to absolutely win and be the greatest nation in the world ever. And Hitler's a genius. And that is just repeated over and over and over and over again. And for all the modernity of the world in which we live in today, most people believe what they're told repeatedly.
Yeah.
They still do. And so if you just repeat over and over again, people will believe it. If you're a diehard Trump supporter, you want to believe that. You'll believe everything he says. If you are a diehard Bernie Sanders man, you're from the left, you'll believe everything he says because it's reinforcing what you already want to what you already want to believe.
But the scary thing is, radio is the technology of the day. The technology of the day today, which is a terrifying one for me, is I would say AI on social media. So bots. You can have basically bot farms, which I assume is used by Ukraine, by Russia, by US. I would love to read the history written about this era, about the information wars. Who has the biggest bot farms? Who has the biggest propaganda machines? And when I say bot, I mean both automated AI bots and humans operating large number of smartphones with SIM cards that are just able to boost messages enough to where they become viral, and then real humans with real opinions get excited also. It's like this vicious cycle. So if you support your nation, all you need is a little boost, and then everybody gets real excited, and then now you're chanting, and now you're in this mass hysteria.
Right.
And now it's the 1984 2 minutes of hate, and the message is clear. I mean, that's what propaganda does. It really clarifies the mind.
And that is exactly what Hitler and the Nazis and Goebbels are doing in the 1930s. Well, they're doing it in the 1920s as well, but more effectively once they come into power, of course. And Hitler is so fortunate that he takes over the chancellorship in January 1933 at a time where the economy is just starting to turn. And he's able to make the most of that. And, if you're Germans and you've been through hyperinflation in the early 1920s, you've been through the humiliation of the Versailles Treaty, which was terrible error in retrospect. And you've been through, then having got through that, you've emerged into a kind of democratic Weimar Republic, which is based on manufacturing. Germany's a traditional genius at engineering and manufacturing and production of high quality items. They're merging through that. Then you have the Wall Street crash and the loans that are coming in from America, which is propping up the entire German economy, suddenly get cut off, and you've suddenly got depression again and massive unemployment. And suddenly Hitler comes in and everyone's got jobs and they're rebuilding and they're growing their military. And the message that's coming out is, we're the greatest, we're the best, we're fantastic. I was telling you earlier on about Hitler's speeches starting dark and ending in hope and light and the sunlit uplands. That's what you're getting. You're suddenly getting this vision of hope, this sort of, my God, actually, this is really working. Okay, so, I'm not sure that I particularly buy into the kind of anti-Semitic thing, but, we'll sweep that under the carpet because overall I've now got a job, I've got money, I've got my new radio, and then this is a genius about the radios, for example. So they have the German receiver to start off with, the Deutsche Empfänger, and then they have the Deutsche Kleinempfänger, which is the German little receiver, little radio. These are genius. This is as outrageous as the arrival of the iPod. I mean, remember that. Suddenly you don't have to have a Sony Walkman anymore. You can have something really, really small and miniature and listen to thousands of songs all at once. What an amazing thing. And the Deutsche Kleinempfänger is 9 inches by 4 inches by 4 inches. It's made of Bakelite. And everyone can have one because it's super cheap. It's just incredible. And no one else has had that because up until that point, radios, generally speaking, are aspirational. They've got sort of a walnut lacquer at the front and, you have them if you're middle class and you show them off to your neighbors to show how kind of, affluent and well-to-do you are. But suddenly everyone can have one. And if everyone can have one, then everyone can receive the same message. And you can also, and this is the whole point about the Hitler Youth as well. The young guys, that's where they're most impressionistic. They're least risk averse, so they're most gung ho. They're most full of excitement for the possibilities of life, and their minds are the most open to suggestion. So you get the youth, you hang on, you get them, and so a whole generation of young men are brought up thinking about the genius of Hitler and how he's delivering us this much better nation and returning our overhauling the humiliations of the First World War. We're overcoming the stab in the back that happened in 1918, etc., etc. And as a young 16, 17-year-old German, you're thinking, yeah, I want a piece of that. And hey, guess what? They've got really cool uniforms and come and join the SS and, get the Fräulein. What's not to like? You can see why it's so clever. And what's so interesting is propaganda today is still using those tenets that Goebbels was using back in the 1930s.